Once again, hello everyone. As you can see, today we have our very esteemed guest, Professor Richard van Zyl-Smit, to talk about something very important.
So Sir is a professor of pulmonology, and he's also a consultant pulmonologist at UCT and at Pretoria Hospital. Pulmonology is the study mainly to do with the lungs, so that's what Sir is focusing on today. He's also a principal researcher at the UCT Lung Institute, so he is the perfect person to speak to us about this issue.
Yeah, so everyone just remember, please give him your full attention. We are very privileged to have him here, and yeah, take it away, sir.
Thanks for that kind introduction, and lovely to be with you all. Just in case you were worried, I can't work out who you all were from the survey, so your results are all safe. And you're not being targeted. I've spoken at several schools. This is an important issue, and so my job this afternoon, in the next half an hour or so, is to try and give you some facts, to provide you with the information for you to make the decisions. I'm not going to tell you what to do. You're big enough and old enough to make those decisions yourselves, but I want to provide you with information that you may or may not know so that you can make an informed decision. So what do? As mentioned, I look after the lungs particularly. I also look after adolescents, and in medicine, adolescence is age 13 up. So any of you who have lung problems who end up at Pretoria, I'm the face I'm afraid you're going to see. And I look after people with all sorts of lung disease, but have a particular interest in smoking, tobacco, cannabis, and vaping, which is what I'm going to share with you guys today. So the title for the talk and the premise is that you are being lied to. Through marketing, through advertising, various people are saying various things to you which may not necessarily be true. So the question that you have to ask is, who is lying to you? So you may or may not know something that is called an alternative fact. So I want to show you a quick little video clip. Let's see if we get the sound right for this one. And then we'll talk about alternative facts. So this is a real live, genuine video clip.
And you did not answer the question.
I did answer your question.
No, you did not. You did
Yes,
not answer the question of why the president asked the White House press secretary to come out in front of the podium for the first time and utter a falsehood. Why did he do that? It undermines the credibility of the entire White House press office on day one.
Don't be so overly dramatic about it, Chuck. You're saying it's a falsehood, and they're giving Sean Spicer, our press secretary, gave alternative facts to that. But the point remains.
Wait a minute. Alternative facts?
So when President Trump alters an alternative fact, it is not a fact, it's referred to as an alternative fact. When you write your exams and your teacher gives you a 0 or a cross, that is deemed an alternative fact. You may think it's true, you may wish for a mark, but it's not. So whether you think something is true or not is not necessarily true, and so that is the challenges. When someone says to you in marketing, this is safe, this is not, you need to question that. So let's get into some facts. Cigarettes, tobacco cigarettes contain somewhere in the region of 4,000 to 8,000 different chemicals. Everything that you can find in your toilet cleaner, in lighter fluid, bug spray, tar, you name it, rocket fuel is contained in a tobacco cigarette. So you do have to wonder what the point is of smoking tobacco cigarettes. But many people do. So what is the challenge with tobacco cigarettes, and why is it so bad? Now, for most of you, you're not particularly worried about dying because you're young. Hopefully, most of you haven't started smoking yet. But what we know is that 50% of people who smoke will die of a smoking-related illness. So can I get everybody to stand up, please? So we're going to do a little exercise. So, 50% chance of dying. In South Africa, we know that 30% of adults will start smoking. So if you have your birthday in January, February, and March, please remain standing. The rest of you may sit down. Okay, so that's about a third of you have randomly decided that you're going to start smoking. You have a 50% chance of dying. Okay? Heads, you die. Tails, you live. Okay. So if your birthday is from 0 to 14, you may sit down. So, just to demonstrate the randomness, if 30% of Westerford started smoking, 50% of that 30% would die. You, unfortunately, are those that are unlucky enough to have died from smoking. So, please sit down. Okay, so it's not all about death, and I know death may be a long way away, but smoking, nicotine have other issues. So, if you look at smoking-related illnesses, other things that smoking can do to you, breast cancer, your risk of breast cancer increases by almost 25% if you start smoking before 17. Mouth cancers, brain, stroke, heart attacks, you name it, smoking causes enormous amounts of disease. But again, I'm aware that you may not necessarily be worried about disease or death. Let's look at looks. Now, I apologize for the pasty white picture, but this is a picture from Finland where everybody is pasty and white. And so what they did was they took this young lady and they CGI'd her to see what she would look like if she smoked. They then took this young gentleman and CGI'd him to see what he would look like if he smoked. So again, if you think about the risks of smoking, we have death, we have disease, we have looks, all of which may or may not be important to you. Sporting performance is impacted significantly if you smoke or vape. Your school performance is also impacted if you smoke or vape. So from a smoking point of view, and I was chatting to your headmaster earlier, and he didn't give me permission, but I'm going to give you permission, that you may tell your parents and your teachers in a very, very polite way what this video shows.
Bennett dinner!
Hey, I'm a dog. What's your excuse?
Can anybody tell us why smoking isn't stupid?
So I may be overstating it, but really from a tobacco smoking point of view, there really is no good reason to smoke. And I said, be polite, but you have my permission to tell anyone who smokes that it's a bad idea. But most of you are not smoking, and most of you won't start smoking. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, and that's vaping. So people keep asking me, well, vaping is supposed to be harmless, right? Isn't it safer than smoking cigarettes? And the best way to explain that to you is asking me whether hitting myself on the head with a hammer is safer than hitting myself on the head with a sledgehammer. Yeah? So the answer is clearly yes. Hitting myself on the head with a hammer is safer than doing the same with a sledgehammer. But that's the wrong question. The question is, do you really want to hit yourself on the head with a hammer at all? And so when you are asking the question, is vaping safe? Comparing it to fresh air is the correct comparison, not compared to the experiment I just did with you where half of you will die if you start smoking. So compared to something that kills 50%, I assume they teach maths at Westerford, if vaping only killed 49% of those that started, it would still be safer than smoking that kills 50%, but that's the incorrect comparison. How much more dangerous is vaping than fresh air should be the question you're asking. So vaping devices, they started to look like cigarettes, which is why they were called e-cigarettes. The current vaping devices look very little like cigarettes, multiple colors, multiple different devices, and the newest varieties are no longer referred to as e-cigarettes, they're actually referred to as ENDS, or electronic nicotine delivery systems. Fancy little computer that generates exactly the type of vape you wish to have, nothing at all like a cigarette. So let's talk about harms of cigarettes, and we've spoken about harms of cigarettes, let's talk about harms of vaping. So we'll start with the sensational harms related to vaping.
In a California electronics store, 1 minute a customer is in a back room picking out a TV. The next, his pocket explodes into sparks and flames.
He is screaming and yelling. All of his right leg was completely burnt.
It's the latest e-cigarette to explode in a long list of similar cases across the country. Experts saying most are caused by lithium-ion batteries, often used in modified vape devices made overseas. A study showing 62% of explosions happen while the e-cigarette is in someone's pocket or actively being used. Earlier this year, the first documented case of an e-cigarette killing someone. A 38-year-old man died after his vape pen exploded. His cause of death listed as...
Okay, so if we want to be really sensational, we can say you shouldn't vape, vaping is dangerous because they explode. But then we could say the same thing about cell phones.
Samsung's Galaxy Note 7 may not be the company's only smartphone that's prone to battery fires. A Galaxy S6 exploded on board a China Airlines flight last night. The S6, part of a line of phones launched in 2015, was being charged on the flight from Palau to Taipei when it started to give off smoke, though the situation was successfully contained.
So again, I'm just giving you an example when people talk about things to say, look, they're dangerous, they explode. Well, the same could be said, as I said, about cell phones. So let's talk about advertising, because that's where most of the lying happens. So if you look at these two adverts, the one on your left says how vaping is the best anti-aging move you can make. And if you look at that, you think, well, hang on a second, if I start wrinkly and start vaping, maybe I'm going to end up non-wrinkly, which is not obviously true. And then the next one, love your lungs, simply refreshing, smoke-free. Well, it belies the fact of all the different chemicals that can occur in vaping and suggesting to you that vaping is as good as fresh air. So I want to just tell you guys a little bit about this argument, because this is something you're going to hear and this is something you may yourselves have heard. This called the harm reduction argument. The argument goes as follows, that if you smoke, vaping is a safer alternative. If you have a 50% chance of dying from smoking, vaping may have a less chance of killing you, which is fair and good if you smoke. Unfortunately, at your age, this argument does not hold because you haven't smoked for 20 or 30 years. So this argument that people use as to why we should have e-cigarettes around, why they should be available, the safer alternative is a marketing ploy from tobacco companies, because tobacco companies actually want you to smoke every day, a packet a day, for the rest of your life and live to your 120. Because if you all died at age 20 from smoking, they would lose their entire market. And so it's not in the best interest of a tobacco company to have their consumer die. So when the tobacco company says, we care for you, what they really mean is we care for your money and we would like you to stay addicted to nicotine, tobacco for the rest of your life and fund us. So let's talk about vaping then. So what is in a vape? Vaping devices have a battery, some are rechargeable, others are disposable. There's a heating coil that contains cadmium and nickel. Both of these two chemicals can cause cancer. And then there's the liquid. What's in the liquid? Propylene glycol, When you go to the theatre and you see smoke on the stage, that's propylene glycol. So that's theatre smoke. Vegetable glycerine is what you cook with. Flavorings are flavorings, and nicotine is what keeps you coming back for your next puff and your next use of an e-cigarette. Theatre smoke is dangerous when you breathe large amounts of it in. Vegetable glycerine, although fine when eaten, when heated to 200 degrees, undergoes something called thermal decomposition and changes into a whole bunch of noxious chemicals. So the fact that it's safe to eat does not mean it's safe to breathe in. And then the nicotine we're going to talk about in a second. Now, some of you may have heard about popcorn lung. Popcorn lung is not what your lungs look like. It's the flavorant in butter popcorn. It's a chemical called diacetyl, and that particular chemical causes really nasty lung disease. Vanilla flavorant, cherry flavor, and cinnamon flavor are all fine to eat in food and sweets. Again, heated to several hundred degrees, then breathed in, causes significant damage to your lungs. So again, the fact that these things are safe and people say, oh, it's the same flavorant as you get in vanilla custard, well, it's not the same because you're not breathing in that flavorant when you're eating it. And so the breathing of these chemicals is the major concern and where we're really worried about the long-term health effects. But the major reason why I'm here and the major concern related to young people like yourselves starting to vape is the issue of nicotine. So nicotine is a psychoactive drug, same as cocaine, heroin. It fits into the same class of chemicals. So what does it do?
Come on, what can I do to help you?
Come on, buddy, headphones.
What?
Hey! Okay, all right. What kind of weed? I said I don't want to talk about it. Wait. Trey, what are you doing? And the molecules will...
So, quite an intense little video clip, but those of you who vape or smoke will know that you need to get to your vape or smoke quite quickly when you start feeling irritable or anxious or angry, because you need that calming effect, and that's because nicotine is working in your brain. So, what is it doing? So I'm going to show you a set of graphs. These are little mice in an experiment where they put a little cannula, a little pipe in the back of their brain, and they measure dopamine. So dopamine is what's often referred to as the happy hormone. It's the hormone that gets released that makes you feel calm and happy. So what they do with these experiments is the baseline is normal, 100%. Then they give the mice some food and they measure the dopamine level. It goes up, and then dopamine levels come down, which is why you feel better after you've eaten, and why when you were at junior school you had snack breaks to make sure that you got some food in. Okay, dopamine goes up and down with food. So, different experiment, or same experiment, different group of mice, they gave them some alcohol. Dopamine level goes up, dopamine level comes down, that's why you feel better when you've had something to drink. Okay, so look at the levels there, they go from 100 to 200. Different group of mice, they take a group of boy mice and they put them in a cage. If you can see the little dotted line, that's when the boy mice get to see the girl mice. Then they take the divider away and the boy mice and the girl mice get together. Dopamine goes up and dopamine goes down. So if you're a mouse and you believe science, then sex is better than alcohol, which is better than food. Okay, so 200%, remember that number. Let's talk about some other drugs. Morphine, the painkiller, you will see it looks slightly flatter. Cocaine, we're now at 340%. You've heard about TIC, methamphetamine, over 1,000. Okay. And nicotine, interestingly, is only about 225. So what's the problem with nicotine? Why do you become so addicted? And part of it is the hand to mouth, in the lungs, into the brain, happens very, very quickly. So what's special about your brains and why are we particularly interested? And the scientific term is something called synaptic plasticity, which is why the matrics are better at sport and science and maths and English, in fact probably much everything compared to the grade 8s, because your brains learn quickly. And the more time you spend at school, the more time you spend practicing, the more time you spend studying, the faster you learn, the quicker you learn, the more you can learn. And that's because at your stage of life, your brains have synaptic plasticity, meaning you can learn fast. The more you stimulate your brain, you lay down these pathways. One of the challenges is that you fear little, you take risks and you experiment, and that's part and parcel of being a young person. So what's the issue here? Well, I mentioned it to you earlier that nicotine is a psychoactive and addictive drug, and so what it does is it interferes with those pathways. And so you get addicted very quickly, it reprograms your brain, and the challenges with nicotine consumption in a young brain that's laying down new pathways is that you learn slower, your memory becomes worse, and so school performance can fall off, sporting performance falls off. And of greater concern in the long term is the issue of if you start vaping as a teenager, the risks of starting to smoke cigarettes, the risks of drug and other alcohol usage, and long-term mental illness, because nicotine is interfering with how your brain lays down those pathways which are supposed to be gaining knowledge, but now are being interfered with the nicotine. So it unfortunately is not without consequence. It may be, inverted commas, safer than smoking tobacco, but it has significant potential risks, which is obviously why I'm here and why I'm sharing this information with you, so at least you can make a decision. We know from the US that roughly 1 in 5 high school students vape. We know in South Africa that in some schools it's well over 1/3 of matrics are vaping, even in grade 8s. I've just been asked to go and talk at a junior school because there are grade 6s and 7s who are smoking and vaping. So it's a big and increasingly worrisome issue. One of the challenges is the fact that it is an international industry. People are making billions and billions of dollars. Juul, $16 billion company, they've unfortunately just got a $438 million lawsuit against them for selling e-cigarettes to minors. And so I want to show you this little video clip quickly. This is the CEO of Juul, who has been asked the question about what they were doing in terms of selling it to minors.
Critics have said that Juul targeted minors through advertising that highlighted sweet and fruity flavors and by using young-looking models. More than 1 in 5 high school students admitted to using an e-cigarette within the last 30 days in a recent government survey.
First of all, I tell them I'm sorry that their child's using the product. It's not intended for them. I hope there was nothing that we did that made it appealing to them. As a parent of a 16-year-old, I'm sorry for them and I have empathy for them in terms of...
So he said 2 things. I hope it's nothing we did and was never intended for them. There's the marketing campaign. Those don't look like old people to me. And what they did was they changed the chemical structure of the nicotine from what's called a free base to a salt to make it easier absorbed, less noxious, tasting better. So they specifically changed the nicotine to make it taste better and marketed young people. And there's the CEO who said, I hope it's nothing we did. I want to quickly switch to 2 comments about cannabis, and then I want to end with a video and hopefully we have a moment or 2 for questions. Tobacco and cannabis, marijuana, weed, dacha, both plant leaves, both can cause cancer. Cannabis is far worse for your brain than tobacco is. What's the issue? Well, cannabis itself is far more neurotoxic, damaging to your brain than nicotine can be, and the problem is it's random. Okay? So some people smoke it, some people vape it, some people think it's safer to eat. It's not safer to eat because once it's in your system you can't get it out. If you smoke and you start feeling high, you can stop smoking. If you've eaten it and you start feeling high, you have to wait for it to get out of your system. So don't think that eating it is in any way safe. It can make you feel pretty wild and raucous in terms of its brain effects. And I know personally of at least 3 cases of high school students who've been to a party, one-off smoked, eaten, using cannabis, ended up in Falkenberg Psychiatric Hospital. Thanks for playing. It's a little bit like an airplane. They don't crash very often. The risks are low, but if it does happen, it's a disaster. And so my implorement to you, if that's the correct term, I'm imploring you to not try it. If you wish to, wait until you're 18, 20 at university, the risks are lower. Because you have got this fantastic developing brain, it's at high risk for acute psychiatric breakdown from cannabis. And so just please, that's one thing I'm asking you not to do. So I want to finish with this little video and then I'm happy to take some questions.
Yeah, when Jack approached me with this interview, I was very hesitant at first at how it would affect my college admissions and just how people perceived me through the internet and whatever. But then like he gave me a couple days to think about like why to do it, and like in those next 2 days I just looked around and like I see that like all of my friends, like all of my best friends are like addicted to nicotine.
What do I do? Where's this go? Should I just click through my side? My name is Fletcher Faden, and I'm 16 years old. I'm 16 years old. I think I started Juul probably like end of sophomore year, so that'd be about like last year or last summer. And yeah, all of the people in my grade started using it.
Talk regularly, straight ahead.
My name is Jack Solomon. I'm 15 years old, and I am a Juul user. We got them from an older kid, and he was teaching me how to use it and stuff, and I got the hang of it. Like I was able to like inhale the smoke without coughing and get a nice head rush, and I was like, this thing is priceless, it's amazing. And I was like, I gotta show all my friends what this thing is.
There have been times in the past where I've been juuling during class, and I've juuled pretty much every moment where I wasn't in class.
I think that kids leaving school desperately needing pods happens a lot, and it shouldn't happen, but kids are very addicted to these e-cigarettes and need this stuff to be satisfied.
People will go during class, people will go to the bathroom, people go between classes, people go in the car while they're driving home. Pretty much any moment where they can be away from the eyes of parents, they'll just be juuling and like all day. Certain people will go through a full pod a day, which is like about the same nicotine content as a pack of cigarettes.
Hi, my name is Margarita and I'm 14 years old and I use the Juul. Sometimes during class, like I'll leave, like if I get really stressed, like it's kind of like my go-to, like I kind of need it. It's just a part of my life now that like I know it's bad, but I can't stop.
I'm Sylvia and I'm 14 and I've been using a Juul for 9 months. When I'm doing my homework every night, I'll be writing and then all of a sudden I'll want a Juul rip and I'll have my pencil in my right hand and my Juul in my left.
Some of my friends have tried using cigarettes and it's because they have been juuling, because they're so used to juuling that they just think it's okay to use cigarettes.
If you banned most of the flavors, like fruit flavors or just like food flavors, I think that not as many kids would try it because it's not as like appealing.
If there were no flavors, kids would not be as attracted to these Juuls.
Banning e-liquids would force a lot of kids to make the right choice. I for sure think that.
There's a message to all people who think that personal freedoms trump public health. You're gonna let kids get really sick if this continues. I guarantee the amount of nicotine that's going to these kids' system will result in some bad shit. I just can't see how it won't. And something's gotta happen soon. Something's gotta happen soon.
So, yeah, it's an American. I apologize for the Americanness. I don't have a South African one yet. So, let me wrap up. I've been fairly frank and I've provided you with a fair bit of information, and you need to make your own decisions. Smoking is just a stupid idea, but there are people that are seriously addicted to nicotine and tobacco. There's help that can be provided for that. You may think that vaping is less harmful, but less does not equal not. And we know from having spoken to and chatted with many high school students that many of you vape or smoke to cope with stress. Please talk to one of the school counselors, your parents. There is help that can be provided. There are better ways to manage to cope than with vaping. There are those of you who can't get through the school day without vaping. We can help with the addiction side of things as well. And as for dacha and cannabis, if you really want to try it, wait until you hit university. School is not the time to be experimenting with weed. So I'm going to leave you with one final comment. I think we might have time for one or two quick questions before you guys head off home. And thanks very much for having me. So nicotine chewing gum is particularly disgusting stuff. If you are smoking, it'll help you stop smoking. No one in their right mind would use nicotine chewing gum just to get a high from it because it tastes awful. If I put a nicotine patch on you, you would also feel pretty terrible because nicotine is a toxic chemical, very helpful to help stop the withdrawal cravings, but not something that many people I know of have tried as a way of getting a high. So, complicated question. So the issue of legalization and decriminalization are two important different things. So the decriminalization of cannabis means that the police don't have to go around and throw people in jail for smoking weed. It doesn't mean it's any safer from the day they did or did not decriminalize it. It was a legal decision related to not having to put people in jail for using it. So I wouldn't use the harm reduction or the legal status of various drugs to interpret their safety or not. One of the drugs that causes the biggest amount of problem in this country is alcohol, which is legal, but alcohol causes more trouble for other people than the person using it. So it may be legal to drink it, but the problem is that when you're drunk, you tend to kill people. So it's an important thing to have a discussion about, but the fact that it's illegal or not is not a good yardstick to use as to whether it's safe or not. One last question. Yes. So the question was, what is the effect of secondhand smoking on teenage brains? I didn't mention secondhand smoking at all, but we do know that secondhand smoke is dangerous. It causes cardiovascular disease, so heart attack, stroke, and can cause emphysema in partners of smokers. Children whose parents smoke have a higher risk of developing ear infections, of developing what's called sudden infant death if you're in a young baby and a parent of a smoker. And in terms of impact on your brain, similar impacts, but thankfully you are at school most of the day, not at home exposed to smoking, which is a good thing. In the old days, when some of your teachers were at school, their teachers would smoke in the classroom. Thankfully they've banned that now. But any exposure to tobacco smoke is not advisable. But if you walk past someone who's smoking, thankfully you're not going to go from an A to a D overnight. So you should be all right.
Thank you very much, Professor. Thank you for your time here. I know for a fact that there was a lot that was learned. And once again, thank you. We're very privileged to have you. Please accept this token of our appreciation on behalf of the school.